Hello, everybody. Got to get everything in the right place and everybody hooked up to the right thing and stop being muffled and all that stuff. So good to see people here for my riff on technical topics in the news. I'm going to do my best to tell you some radical ideas, provoke you a bit. I managed to get lots of people disagreeing with me over on LinkedIn. That's my goal for the day. So looks like I achieved that. Let's see if I can annoy some more of you today. If you don't know who I am or why I'm here, I'm Squirrel. This is the Squirrel Squadron. And my good friend Laura is going to stick a little bit at the bottom of the screen, I think, in a moment. That's going to tell you a little bit about some of the exciting things happening in the Squirrel Squadron. For those who don't know, the Squirrel Squadron is my community of tech and non-tech people. It's very rare to get executives together who are CFOs and COOs and CTOs and heads of product and heads of sales. That doesn't happen very often, but I managed to do it. We've got thousands of people in the squadron. At the bottom here are a few of the exciting things that are going on. We have events every week. We have a new podcast, so please join and listen to that. We've got a fantastic guest named Joanna Rothman, and we have fantastic discussions going on over on the forum. I was just joining in on one about whether or not you should have kickoff meetings. That managed to annoy some people who said, yeah, kickoff meetings are great. I think they're a waste of time. So that's the kind of discussion that we're having. How do we make technology insanely profitable? How do we get the technology teams to be engaged with the business? How do we keep our marketing folks actually selling the product that we have to sell? Those are the sorts of discussions that we have. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is some predictions and observations and things that I'm seeing in the technology market today. And some of you asked me some fantastic questions. I would love it if you would ask me questions here as we go. Nobody may want to speak today, that's okay. But if you do, please throw it into the chat and don't hesitate. Whatever platform you're on, go ahead and put in a question. No question's dumb for sure. And a provocative question is very welcome. We have several that people submitted beforehand, which I'm going to deal with as we go. And I have a few that I just want to rant about myself. So I hope some of these are insightful and provocative and at least a little bit world shaking for you. Let's see where we can go with some of these ideas that I'm seeing in the market today that could be very helpful to you in making sure you stay ahead of the tech trends and you actually make them profitable and useful to you. No point being trendy if you can't actually get results. And that's what I'm all about. Okay, so I want to start with a notion. I want to start with an experience that many of us have. Some of you watching this are going to be too young to have experienced this, but you've probably read about it. And I think a lot of you will actually be old enough to remember a fantastic tool called Napster. And by the way, Laura, I think we don't need the Chiron at the bottom anymore. Thanks for putting that up. So, right. So, Napster was a fantastic free piece of software. I think you did pay for it somewhere, but I don't know anybody who paid for it. The main audience was university students, and these students would be very interested in listening to music. What a surprising characteristic for students. And Napster had a wonderful property. It had something about it. It had a piece of, it had a feature, it had a piece of technology in it that was so simple to describe, but so popular that it really drove a complete revolution and led to music tools that we have today. And that was very simple. All it did was you typed in the name of a song and you got to listen to the song. Now, if you guys think of what you do today, you can go to Spotify, YouTube, Google, lots of different places. I can go to my Echo, my Alexa on my speaking device here at home on my smart speaker, and I can say the name of a song physically. I can say it out loud, and I get the song played for me. This doesn't work perfectly. It's not a lock, and that was true for Napster as well. If you had a sufficiently obscure song, you didn't actually get to listen to it because Napster wouldn't know what it was. But in many, many cases, you could type the name of a song and listen to it. And that creates, when you have a feature that's that simple, that's that valuable, and that is really works. You actually could get almost any song you wanted. That creates tremendous gravity. You can think of it like collecting a lot of mass in a star system, right? You get several stars and you smush them together. You get something that starts to get very heavy, and you get neutron stars and eventually you get black holes. You know, they have huge amounts of gravity. They pull everything around them toward the mass at the center. And when you have a feature with that much pull, it almost doesn't matter what the rules are and what the technology will allow, what the law will allow. This thing kind of creates a tidal wave that pushes everything else out of the way. The force of gravity is so strong. So of course Napster was illegal. You couldn't just type the name of a song and not pay the artist anything. That was completely not allowed in 2002 or whatever it was. And but it was still so popular and so valuable that even though Napster themselves, the company that produced it, got sued out of existence, loads of others popped up behind them. I remember there was one called Nutella with a G. That's what I remember. But I'm sure there were loads and loads of others that popped up to fill the same need. And they all had this same feature, which was you type the name of a song and you listen to the song. That's what people wanted to do. They didn't want to be stuck. Some of you are old enough to remember that you might be stuck listening to whatever was on the radio at the time. Nowadays, you can say, look, I want to listen to the same song 20 times in a row, or I want to listen to only jazz music played by Taiwanese banjo players, and you can find that, and you can play it, and that's what you get. And you can type in the name of a song and get the song played for you, even though the industry, the record industry, really didn't want you to be able to do that. And of course, they caved at a certain point, and now people get streaming revenue. And in fact, people get to be number one on the charts, even though they've never actually sold a record. All their revenue and all the sales come virtually through something like Spotify. So that's the kind of tidal wave. That's the kind of force of nature that you can get when you get a really powerful product, when you have a really powerful proposition. And I can think of another couple of examples. Then I'm going to give you some contemporary ones, but I wanted to set this scene for you. The one example I remember very long ago is that the first laser printers really produced very high quality output, when before you would get things that were just what are called dot matrix. But you remember, you'll have seen them in old movies probably, that they have little holes at the side and they would kind of feed through, and they're green and white is the paper, and then the text looks like it's just been punched out with dots. It's a very ugly font. It doesn't look like anything like a printed book. But the laser printers would produce these beautiful fonts, beautiful text. They had typography like kerning, so things would fit in together. They'd hyphenate. They'd do all kinds of wonderful things to make the text really look good. And all you had to do was hold that up. I remember Steve Jobs talking about this. All you have to do is hold this up and say, do you want this? And people say, yes, how much? And that created a force of nature. That created that kind of drive for people to get things like Macintosh computers, which had these early laser printers, even though maybe that wasn't their standard business component, wasn't what their IT department wanted to use. Very similarly, when people were first getting into Ubers, and you might not remember how bad taxis were, they're still pretty bad, and Ubers aren't great either, but a taxi would be dirty, it would come slowly, you had to kind of wait around and wave your hand at it and hope that somebody saw you. If you, like my wife, has used guide dogs for many years, and we would get discriminated against. Somebody wouldn't stop because we had a dog, and it's like, we don't want to take the dog. That isn't allowed. That's not, the law says you can't do that. But people would do it anyway. The taxi drivers would just go past us. So people had all kinds of problems with taxis, and an Uber was clean, and it came on time, and you could tell where it was. And, nowadays, I think you can even schedule them. Uber really shifted the market for taxis by being a better taxi. It was illegal, right? In most places, you weren't allowed to run your own taxi service like Uber did. But that didn't stop anyone. The force of gravity was so strong, the idea that it would be great if you could go to an app and get a taxi, and you would know where it was, and it would update you, and you would know what was happening. That was such a strong idea that it pushed everything else out of the way. And Uber had a lot of problems. I'm not endorsing Uber here, but what we do have today is much cleaner taxis. There, you can, in every city, whether you use Uber or something else, you can get a ride quickly on your phone with tracking. You know where the taxi is. You know what's going to come for you. You have a lot more information than you ever did before, and it's a much better experience. Those kinds of drivers are present today. And so I give you the historical examples so I can point to some things that I'm seeing today that I think are going to be that kind of level of push, that are going to have that much gravity. So let me tell you about a couple of those. I'm going to turn to questions that I got from you. And I'd, again, love to see all of you putting in questions. So if you have something in the news today and you're saying, what's going on with this? Why aren't we doing this? Maybe you want to talk about biometric controls for guns, because we've had a lot of gun and other violence recently. Maybe you want to talk about, we were getting on the forum a discussion about U.S. politics and what kinds of lessons we can learn from that for technology and for projects. So anything goes. Hit me with a question if you've got one. Otherwise, I got plenty here to cover both my own material and some questions that you guys asked as we set up. So one of these is not really, we're not hearing much about it. Don't worry, I am going to say the words AI at some point here, but I'm not going to start there because I think there's way too much about AI and the applications are more limited than people think, although there will be gravity for them. But one place where I think there's going to be tremendous gravity is in expanding screen real estate. So, I'm probably a little box on your screen right now, and you probably have a few other boxes and you're trying to cram them all into your screen. If you're really lucky, maybe you have one of these long curved screens. I have one of these that I use as well that's behind and it's giving me some extra light here as well. And maybe you can fit 3 or 4 of those, and you can watch me and you can read your email and you can check out the latest Twitch stream or something like that. But you can't fit a whole lot in there. If you have 7 documents to read, you can't fit them and you have to keep switching. And the Apple Vision Pro is one way of getting virtual screens. And we've all seen these in the movies, right? Iron Man is, what's his name? Tony Stark in the movies is always, shifting things around and moving stuff on the around him. And he's looking at things as a great way to tell a story in a movie. It's also a great way to work. And when you can get a lot of data around you and you can manipulate it and work with it in a very natural way, you're making tremendous progress. That's like typing the name of a song and listening to it. That's like pushing buttons on your phone and getting a taxi. And we can now do those things. The Apple Vision Pro is, I think, one of the best in moving in that direction, but it's not finished. Just like Napster, was illegal and hard to get and had all kinds of problems, but you can still type the name of a song and get to listen to it. Similarly, the Vision Pro and similar tools that are going to give us the ability to put something on our faces, still kind of uncomfortable, but that's going to get better, and manipulate data not only in front of us, but to the right and to the left and behind us and above us, and to manipulate many different pieces of information. That's going to be revolutionary for a few groups. That's people like traders. If you've ever seen, Wolf of Wall Street or one of those where people are trading and they have lots of screens around them and they're what was the other one? The Big Short is another example where you can see these people who have 7 or 8 or 9 screens that literally almost surrounds them. And it's not enough. I used to work with those folks, and I know that what they need is large amounts of data, and they have their brains trained to go, that number is wrong. I can make a trade based on that number, and I'll make a penny on every share, and it's a zillion shares, so I'll make a lot of money. And if they can get enough numbers around them, they can detect the anomalies and figure out what's going on. They're already trying to do this, and that's an initial signal that by having many physical screens around them. So I predict that those folks are going to put on these goggles and they're going to have virtual screens. Then I don't know what the trading floors are going to be like because they're all going to be walking around running into each other. But that's another problem. Another place where people really need to do this is data science. So there are folks who are manipulating huge amounts of information. You can think of Facebook with all the people, the user behavior and login data and so on. You can think of your favorite e-commerce site generating huge amounts of data. Think of a hospital or a medical researcher who's manipulating huge amounts of genomic data and looking at how the human genome is flawed in certain ways or how certain genes can be turned on or turned off. And they want to see all of that information together so they can see this part doesn't match that part, and this one is an anomaly, and this one is standard. And getting that amount of data in one place is going to be hugely transformational. So I've been saying this for a while. I haven't got a Vision Pro yet. I really need to do that. So I can maybe make some videos for you and show you guys quite how revolutionary this is. But it's very early days. It's Napster days, right? This stuff is not there yet. I don't think we're going to see everybody walking around with goggles on, but it's coming. And the changes, the improvements in productivity for the right kind of person. I mean, if you're customer service and you just have to answer questions about people's logins, you don't need 17 screens. That's not important to you. And it's not going to make a huge difference for those people. But people who are manipulating large amounts of data are going to be really changed. Their workplace is really going to look different, and they better get used to, exercise your neck muscles, because you're going to have to put on those goggles. You're going to have to figure out how to get that amount of data, or you won't be competitive in your market anymore. So there's one for you. There's a rant about the Vision Pro. I would love disagreement, by the way. So if you've tried it out, I'd love to hear what you think. Is it too early yet? Is it something that we really should pay attention to? I'm really convinced that this is a direction that has this gravity to it that's going to pull people in the direction of getting this tremendous productivity increase. But you may disagree. I would love to hear from you. Toss something in the comments, and I will respond as best I can. Now, I want to go on to a completely different topic, and I didn't preview this in the material that we sent out, but it's really been striking me recently how much gravity there is for battery technology. And if you walked around in any Western city, and I think even some Eastern cities, you will have noticed all these e-bikes around, right? So people no longer are necessarily riding bicycles by pushing the pedals around, right? They get on, they don't push the pedals, and the machine has enough power to take them along somewhere. I saw someone doing this. Unfortunately, he was texting while he was doing it, which I did not think was very safe. But I saw him on a rural road out here in England, nowhere near a big city or anything. He was obviously going a long way, and he was texting as he was going uphill on his e-bike. And I remember riding my bicycle around the streets of Portland many, many years ago, and uphill was hard enough when you had to turn the pedals. And I certainly wasn't trying to send anyone any messages or write anything. So the level of convenience and flexibility that you get for transportation is very high, but there's lots of other applications for battery technology, and we're getting better at them. There's all kinds of limitations and problems, which we know. This is similar to Napster. This is similar to Uber, right? There are difficulties and problems, but these early technologies are really the way the world is going because of this gravity. So the benefits, I'll turn to the limitations in a second, but the benefits are things like very rapid release of stored electricity. So I was watching a pot boil, and I have electricity in my house. We don't have any gas here in my 600-year-old house with a thatched roof, kind of not so good to have gas around. So we run everything on electricity. We have an induction hob or range, a stove. And, I'll wait 5-10 minutes for some water to boil. And with a battery that was storing the electricity and releasing it very fast, some folks have figured out how to get that water to boil in about 45 seconds. So you're actually getting better performance out of your electricity if you store a bunch of it up in a battery. It might take you a while to charge the battery, but then you can release it very quickly. And that's different. That's not how batteries have worked to date. The battery in your phone stores up data, it takes a while for it to get all that charge into it, and then it releases it over time. Your phone doesn't use it all up at once, unless you're streaming 5 things on your phone, and I wouldn't know why you would do that. So what we're seeing now is these advances in battery technology, which are also being driven by the desire to use some ways of generating electricity, which are a little cleaner than the ones we've been using, things like solar or wind or water. And those are intermittent, right? So if the wind's blowing, you get a lot of wind power, but then you have to put it somewhere, because when you actually need it, the wind might not be blowing. And similarly, the sun might not be shining when you need the solar power, and so on. So there's a lot of market forces. There's a lot of gravity pushing people toward better and better battery technology, and it's starting to respond. So this is more speculative. I'm not sure we need a pretty big breakthrough here. We need a scientific revolution that really shows us how not to have some of the downsides, like uncontrollable fires. Kind of scary, right? We had a container ship that was had a raging fire, and most of the reasons that it was a raging fire was that some of the items on the ship were electric vehicles, right? And those are very hard to control. You get a fire going, you just kind of let it burn out, and the fire brigade will come and kind of watch the fire for you. This worries me because I have an electric car outside my thatched roof house. I try to be very careful, making sure my car is not, for example, fully charged. But the point is that we're getting better and better at this, and we're beginning to reduce some of these impacts. So I don't think this is tomorrow. I mean, I think it's worth going out and trying a Vision Pro. I think you don't need to make a big bet on batteries yet, but batteries are coming. Batteries are going to make a huge difference for storing all kinds of electrical power wherever it might come from. Currently we get our electricity mainly from things like coal and nuclear and so on. We may continue with that. We may continue to have that way of generating the electricity, but we need to store it. And better ways of storing it opens up more possibilities. So I would certainly be watching the battery direction. On the other hand, I probably wouldn't buy Tesla stock right now because our friends at Tesla and in general, the electric car industry are not doing as well. That's because that's been a bit overblown. It was supported by governments at first to try to get it going, but it's in a bit of a slump. And I think that's likely to continue. We haven't got the battery technology to the stage that it's as easy to drive an electric car as it is, say, to drive an e-bike. So maybe more people will get on e-bikes. Who knows? Okay. So that's the second of 3 areas that I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to turn to your questions soon. So here's another. And this time I am going to say artificial intelligence. Sorry, if you're watching the recording, which many of you are, I suspect, feel free to skip over this if you've been AI'd out. But, I think there's something here that you will find useful. And that is particularly that there are ways to use AI that are really effective. And I have an example I'm going to share with you, a client of mine who really used it effectively even before all the hype started. And no, people are not tending to do that. One of the problems is the user interface and the name, like ChatGPT, encourages you to just talk to it and to have it talk to your customers. And I think that's really dangerous. So I have 3 laws of AI. I'm not going to go through them here, but I will link to them in the forum post that will come after this. So if you're curious about that, have a look on the forum or ask me, and I'll point you to my 3 laws. But I'm going to focus on the first law of AI, which is your robot, your artificial intelligence, your ChatGPT, should be off stage. You do not want your customers reading text that has been written by an artificial intelligence. You do not want to send emails that have been written by AI. You do not want to produce documentation and user interfaces and reports and PowerPoint slides and things that have AI as the source of most of the text. Because we've all seen that now, right? We're starting to see that in our spam inboxes. We're starting to see that in Amazon books and other places where it's just so obvious that it's been written by an artificial intelligence bot. It's a tool and not by a human. And that's because it's boring. That's one of the main things. Artificial intelligence is kind of the lowest common denominator of the entire internet, which is pretty boring to start with. So not surprising that if you mix it all together, you get more boring. But also really noticeable, really obvious that you've not really applied yourself. And, just like sending, say, a pre-printed thank you note or something like that, really indicates that you didn't really care about the present, right? So you have a kind of generic thank you and you send it after your wedding or something like that. And it says, thank you for your kind present, and printed as your name. That's not as good as a handwritten one that really showed that you cared and showed actual understanding of what the present was. In a similar way, if you're writing back to your partners, if you're putting questions on your website, if you have a chat that tries to talk to you, I'm fighting with one right now for a prepayment card that I use. And every time I write to them, I just get back something from the robot. And it's obvious it's from a robot, right? It's not responded to what I've said. And your customers know that. So don't let your artificial intelligence be on stage. But it's great off stage. I use, let me tell you one of the ways I use ChatGPT, and that is to generate research for me about who would be interested in stuff I write. So I write the material, right? Everything you see that comes from me really comes from me. It's my thinking, it's my ideas. Some of them are horribly wrong. Some of them are provocative and, really irritate people. But they're all me. You can blame me. It's not the bot. But then I say, hey, ChatGPT, which of the thousands of people in this world squadron would be really interested in this? Then I'll send it along to them and I'll tag them on the forum and do other things to make sure that it's going to people who are really excited about batteries, if I'm writing about that. People who are really excited about space. I've got a client in the space domain right now. I'm really following what's happening with those poor astronauts stuck on the space station, because Boeing can't figure out not only how to keep doors on airplanes, but how to make sure that engines don't burn out when they go to space, kind of important to keep your engines working until you land. That's one of the characteristics of an engine that I've heard is important. Anyway, so I use the artificial intelligence for research. And that's the thing I just want to underline most strongly is off stage as a research assistant that gives you information like who's going to be most interested in these tools, in this material, in this writing. Which of my customers would be best for me to approach at this point for a renewal? And I wanted to give you a fantastic example of someone who uses it this way. There's a company I worked with who does evaluations and fault analysis for companies who are using various kinds of mechanical devices. You could think of these like the oven you have in your house, or the heating you have in your house, but at an industrial scale. So they're dealing with a heating service for a whole factory, or a series of robots that paint cars, that kind of thing. And so what they want to do is rapidly find faults, because if they can figure out why something is not working, they can fix it quickly and do something. But just like your oven might start flashing error 12, and you're like, what do I do for error 12? The same thing happens on these industrial machines. And what these guys do is they will take the very, very technical manuals that all these machines come with, that humans have written, but that are hard to access, right? Because you got to figure out which painting machine do I actually have? How does it work? What does, where's the error section of the manual? Have I even got the right manual? And so actually going through and working out what the problem is quite a heavy customer service load. And they said, look, a computer can do that part. And in fact, we can provide a chat bot that will do the differential diagnosis to figure out what model you have, what kind of error you're getting, what you can do about it, and how to run the diagnostics. So what they did is they fed into an artificial intelligence tool, to a model, all of the manuals that these various companies, their customers, have, and said, okay, now what I want you to do is create a tree. And it's literally something you can draw on the screen. It's a computer science term called a tree, not like a tree that grows in the forest, but a kind of circle here, and then a line that goes down. You could go this way or you could go that way. The answer is yes or no. Okay, now is the green light blinking or is it the blue light? And so on and so forth. And you go all the way down, and eventually you get to, okay, now turn it off and on again and push the yellow button twice, or whatever the diagnostic solution is. And the machine could figure out from all the manuals what kind of rules you would follow to get the right results and to get quickly to the answer rather than having to dig through all the manuals. And then they use a dumb service to actually follow through those diagnostics. And many of them actually end with call a human, but tell the human, right, a lot of the information that you've determined. So what they were doing there is not having the machine try to talk to customers and explain to them that they should push the yellow button twice, but instead have the machine figure out what the rules are. And once they had figured out what the rules are, apply those rules and use them in a dumb way, not trying to write text, not trying to be impressive with all the information and your ability to write good, exciting words. You're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to impress your customers with that. But if you can diagnose their problems in 5 minutes instead of 5 hours, you're going to be a very profitable company. And they've done very well with this kind of diagnostic research-based analysis. So I wanted to share that story with you. Now, I don't see any questions here, so I'm going to turn to some of your questions, and that means I have to find the right thing on my screen. One of the problems with having many screens is, of course, you have to find where things are. So I just have to do that. Give me a moment. There we go. I found the right one, and I'll stick it up here for questions that you all asked when you signed up. So Ferdy asks, how do you stimulate creativity from your stuff? I think Ferdy means staff. In using the shiny new AI tools in productive ways. How do you get them to be creative in using them that way? Well, one thing, Ferdy, I would say is don't be so creative. Because if you start being creative and you say, oh, we're going to use AI to write our sales emails and to try to get people excited about our product, I predict you're going to have a lot of trouble. Now, we did a live stream a few months ago where someone came on and he helped me understand how with enough effort, with enough cleverness, you can produce reasonable writing. But I don't have a lot of faith. I think that's pretty tough to do. And a lot of us mere mortals, we're going to have trouble doing that. So I recommend keeping the bot off stage and therefore restricting your creativity to a certain degree. But what I'd encourage you to do, Ferdy, is find ways to produce lots and lots of data. Produce lots of clean data, lots of information that's well labeled, that's been checked, that's accurate, just like those manuals in that example in the factory, right? Because in the factory, they have accurate information. They just have so much of it, they don't know what to do. You know, my brother used to be a document manager for Shell Oil, and he showed me shelf upon shelf upon shelf of documents he was digitizing at that time. And it was all about, of course, oil rigs and ships with oil in them and how to repair a refinery when it catches fire and stuff like that. Very, very important information, very hard to access, right? Gathering dust in a corner instead of being immediately accessible and usable. So, Ferdy, what I'd encourage you to do is feed your staff valid data. And this is a hard task. This is not an easy thing. Humans have to do this, maybe with a little computer assistance, but humans have to go through and say, okay, this is the right manual. It's been checked. We know it applies to this one, and label it, and then the machine can actually use it. And in your world, which I think might be biotech, Ferdy, there's tons and tons of data, right? You have genomic information, you have data about materials that you're using, and the results of your experiments, and the electronic lab notebooks, and all the beautiful things. If you can get that material accessible, and then tell people, look, you can go into the library and use this and use the AI to do research for you, I predict you'll get some very, very creative results if you help people along with that. Ask me more about that. I'd love to talk more about it on the forum or elsewhere. The fancy name for this, by the way, is Retrieval Augmented Generation. And if you want a tool to play around with to do that, go to ZenFetch. You'll find an old live stream where I worked with the founders of ZenFetch and showed off some tools and ways that I use those in the way that I'm describing for this research purpose. So I hope that's helpful, Ferdy. Feel free to jump in with questions or tell me I'm all wet or tell me that I'm missing something. Okay, we have one from Roland here. And he did something funny. He kind of piggybacked on Ferdy's question, but then he really kind of brought up a different topic. So he talked about difficulties in AI scaling. And he gave a couple of articles here, which I recommend people have a look at on the forum, about whether the operating costs are too high. Is it just too hard to run these things? And you may be taking in billions of dollars, as OpenAI is, from just everybody subscribing and using the APIs, but you may still have operating costs that even outstrip that. And also the environmental costs. And in a lot of cases, capitalist society has not figured out the externalities, has not figured out how to charge people appropriately for their use of water, for example, to cool their data centers, and their use of the electricity. You're paying directly for the electricity, but you may not be paying for the pollution that it produces. You may not be paying for some of the challenges in the maintaining the grid and so on. So there's lots of difficulties with using AI. This is one of the reasons that I wanted to tell that story at the beginning about Napster, because there were lots of problems with it too, right? Not only that you didn't have the rights to use the songs, but a lot of artists didn't publish their songs in a sort of stream-friendly way. So there was a lot of people who had to go and translate things off their CDs and figure out how to publish them and so on. But there was huge gravity to want to do this. There was huge drive from the value that was being produced from just this little piece of entertainment, but it was a huge amount of interest for people who love music to be able to type the name of a song and listen to the song. Even more so, there's tremendous value that people are getting right now from the right uses of AI. I don't think they're getting a ton from sending a spam or writing thousands of books a day on Amazon and things like that. They might be getting a little value, but not a lot. But the huge value is in doing things like I was saying about the research, saving huge amounts of time in keeping your factory up, addressing problems and diagnostics and so on. That's just one tiny example where an AI can do tremendous amounts of research, save a huge amount of time. And so people are going to really want to solve these problems. And when I see huge value that's demonstrated, it's really in front of you, can't be theoretical. It'd be great if we had time machines. Any of you have a time machine, you talk to me. I have like 10 startup ideas we can start tomorrow. But time machines don't actually exist. We don't have them. So even though they'd be great and we can think of lots of applications for them and there'd be a huge demand for them if we had them, we ain't got them. But we really do have sort of what you could say is a bright and capable research assistant who can just go off at a phenomenal speed and run through a bookshelf that's as wide as my house and look at every book in there and tell you which are the 3 that are valuable for you to read. That's really high value. And so people are going to be really motivated to figure out how to deal with those externalities, how to fund artificial intelligence, how to keep the costs lower. And there's lots of interesting work on that. One just piece of news recently, Roland, that you might want to read about is we've just had an open version of these tools, something that you could just download and run yourself if you had enough resources from Facebook. And so that kind of movement is going to create the opportunity for other people to tune and to get smaller versions. I don't think anybody's got it quite working on a phone at full scale yet. When you use ChatGPT on your phone, it's going off to many servers elsewhere that are using an awful lot of resources, a lot of electricity. But people are working very assiduously on getting it small enough that you could disconnect your phone from the internet and your phone could handle the types of interactions that you have with a ChatGPT or a Claude or Gemini or one of those tools. So bear this in mind, watch this space. But my prediction is, Roland, that these problems will get solved because there's such huge gravity, there's such a huge pull to produce the value. So let's see if I'm right. I'd be very interested to see it, but I imagine it'll be a very bumpy road. Some folks will go bankrupt. Some folks will encounter cost shocks. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a big hype cycle now and we have a reduction at some point. But there's real value here. There's a real change happening in how people work, and I think that makes a big difference. Okay, I'd love more questions. I have one more from Robin. And Robin's question is in a very different direction. And I have 2 more, actually. Fantastic. But one I've already answered. So Clifton asked best practices in AI. Clifton, have a look at the 3 laws of AI that I'll link in the follow-up forum post. And of course, my previous comments. So Clifton, I think I covered a lot of your questions, but if I didn't, toss them in here. But I think, Clifton, I addressed what you were interested in looking at. Now, Robin asks, what is the tech hiring market actually like? We can't get STEM people, science, technology, engineering, I forget what the M is in STEM. We can't get those people versus no one is hiring. Well, I'll tell you, I observed something. I had a discussion with Roland and some others on the forum recently about this. I've noticed a few people leaving the tech community. They've left the industry and gone into other stuff. Somebody I have huge respect for has gone off and become a woodworker. And another guy, I was looking him up on LinkedIn, and I noticed he was a landscape gardener. And I said, these are very interesting directions for people to go, because those environments, those industries don't pay as well as technology. But are they being driven out by an actual softening of the market? So I haven't got a clear sense of that. And I know we have some folks perhaps here and certainly on the forum who are in the recruiting space. So I'd like to hear from them what they're actually seeing day to day. But I'll say that my clients are not having any trouble hiring engineers. No one is telling me, look, I have 27 positions open. I can't get anyone. Now, what they do say is sometimes it's hard to get enough seniority. And I think that's only going to get worse because a lot of our junior roles are going to start getting taken by human-computer hybrids, not just the computer, not AI, but a less skilled person being assisted by a computer. So it's going to be harder to bring people up through the ranks by doing kind of crummy, less experienced, lower level jobs to start with, and then becoming more senior. So I'd say maybe one reason that you're seeing this, Robin, is we've got a kind of bifurcated market. More senior people kind of in the middle, the individual contributors who have been around a long time but haven't become managers. Those folks are few and far between. Those folks are still quite hard to find. And I'm always telling my clients that if they're especially moving into new areas, if they're trying to expand their technology, if they're trying to make more profit by bringing out new products, that's often why they bring me in. I'm telling them you need the more senior people. You need the ones who've been around the block. You need the ones with battle scars. And they have trouble finding those. Those are harder. But at the junior level, getting a person to do a fairly basic job, to do something that is pretty well known and fairly routine, or at least not as challenging, that's pretty soft right now. I would say that's, I'm not hearing anybody complain about it. I would love to hear if people are seeing something different, especially in different parts of the world. So some folks will be watching me in Australia. You know, we have forum members around the world. So if you're seeing something different where you are in Thailand or Australia or Africa, I'd love to hear it. But I'm not seeing a dearth of capable, perhaps not quite as senior engineers around. Now, you didn't ask this, Robin, but I should mention that there's also a softening at the top end of the market. So finding CTOs, VPs of engineering, heads of product, people with executive level experience, that end has softened. And I know some folks who've been looking for a job with those types of skills and experience who are having some trouble because there's a bit more of those folks around in the market. We had some layoffs. We've had some changes in technology companies, particularly some of the end of zero interest and so on has hit tech companies a bit harder. And so there have been more of those executive folks who are looking around for something else to do. So I'm seeing a lot of folks enter consulting like I do, and even some folks enter woodworking. So that's the state of the market that I see. I am not in touch with it in the way some of our listeners and some of our forum members are, Robin. So let's see if we can get any of our recruiter folks to comment. I've got another thread on the forum you might want to have a look at, Robin, where you will see some questions. I haven't had any answers yet. Let's see if some of those folks can come in. Maybe they're so busy dealing with the large number of folks in the market that they're not able to answer, or maybe it's just August. I think probably the latter. So let's keep poking on that one. Let's see if we can get some insights from folks doing this day in and day out. I will tell you that I see middle range, or sort of top range of engineers, the most senior, they're rare. Bottom range, not so hard. You know, middle, mid-range, junior, not so hard to find. And senior, very, very senior executives certainly are a little more available than they have been. This is all by comparison to how tech used to be. Tech has always been hard to hire in, so it's just slightly less hard, is I guess how I should put it. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. I think I've riffed on as many things as I had planned to. So unless somebody has something else, I will close up here by summarizing briefly. There's lots of gravity happening. There's lots of new ideas that have a lot of pull that are drawing people to really invest and solve problems, because there's huge profits to be made, because there's huge benefit to society, because there's a huge demand for typing in the name of a song and listening to it. Those sorts of forces are at play. And the three biggest places that I talked about today are the Vision Pro, so tools for getting something on your face that lets you work with data all around you, so you can work with a huge amount and be much more productive personally. Batteries to hold more charge and release it very quickly. That's the new part, and that's why we're seeing a lot of e-bikes and some quite innovative ways of storing energy that should really help us. Probably Roland will probably help us with some of the costs of artificial intelligence. And AI was the third area I talked about. I said stop using it for talking to people. It might be called ChatGPT, but it's terrible at chatting. Use it instead for research. Use it instead to ask questions. And people are getting tremendous value out of that. A huge draw in that direction. Okay, so as always, if you're watching this and you're like, what is this Squirrel Squadron thing that Squirrel is talking about? Have a look at, I'll see if I can type it in here, Squirrel Squadron, squirrelsquadron.com. I'll get that up here on the screen. as soon as I can. There we go. So head on over to squirrelsquadron.com. I've got to sit up so you can see me. Squirrelsquadron.com. That's where you can find the follow-up posts. You can find all these discussions that we're having. You can ask your own questions, and of course, come to lots more events like this one. In 2 weeks, we are doing our initial recording of the Insanely Profitable Tech podcast. And we have the world-renowned management expert written, I've forgotten how many books on how to manage a tech team. And we're going to be talking about budgets. How can you get money for anything? And how do you work in your organization in an effective way to make sure you can fund what you believe you need to do? And how do you get consensus around that? So Johanna is a wonderful expert on that. She's kicking off this new podcast, which we record live. So it'll be a live stream like this one. You come along to the recording, you can ask questions just like people did here. And then you can listen to it as a podcast when you're out running or walking or driving your car as it comes out over the next month. So we have a wonderful series of guests coming for that, which I really appreciate all of the kind folks joining us to be a part of that. And please go to squirrelsquadron.com to sign up if you're interested for that series of podcasts. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Stay warm. It's awfully warm here in Britain, so that won't be too hard. And we'll see you next time. I didn't even mention next week's event, which is on Tuesday. So it's at a slightly different time. It's a little bit earlier. And it's another Ask Me Anything. So you can sign up on squirrelsquadron.com for that as well. Have a wonderful day. Take care.